Well, just to give you an introduction for those of you who do not know, hello everyone, I'm Nat, and I am the head of community at Exceptional Individuals. For those of you who do not know, we are a UK-based neurodiverse employment partnership. Essentially, what that means is we help those who are of working age and above. So we help people with dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, ADHD, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, Tourette's, OCD, the whole spectrum. Myself, I am dyslexic. And to give you a bit of a background of how my story, I was highly suspected of being dyslexic my whole life, but I think it wasn't until I was like just about before 16 when I was diagnosed, which was good because it meant I got the support, but a bit annoying because it meant that after 16 I needed another diagnosis. But thankfully I've got co-occurring conditions, so I'm also diagnosed with ASD and dyspraxia, which meant I got the similar help regardless of whether or not I was dyslexic officially or not. But it took me so long to read and write pronunciations, and we've been doing webinars for a while now on, am I dyslexic, looking at dyslexia from pop culture. And I think going at the history was really interesting when researching today, because I think it gives you a good context of how far we've come. Because let's face it, being dyslexic can be tough. And to know that society has moved a long way since its inception of the terminology, I think can be quite uplifting. And it also shows you how much further we still have to go. So without further delay, let's begin. We are a neurodiverse team, so nearly everyone in our team is diagnosed with a neurodiverse condition, way of thinking, however you like to call it. But I think by being experts by experience, we come from hopefully a very empathetic point of view. And it's not just about the science to us, even though that is important. It's also about like the real world implications of being neurodiverse. Now, let's start off with a quick bit of terminology. When we're talking about dyslexia and neurodiversity, we are not talking about deficits. We are talking about fluctuation of abilities. So being great at some things, struggling in other areas. Dyslexia, to what most people have come to understand, is about having normal or average or above intelligence, so having a high IQ, yet having a disproportionate difficulty in reading, pronunciation, phonologics. And that's normally the basics of how you get diagnosed. So it's not because you can't do something, it's because you can do things, some really well, and the others they don't quite like line up. So on this diagram, which is general, so it's just different examples, on this one, this person is really good at maths but struggles with creativity, or a really good decision maker but isn't able to communicate. Now, whatever those skills are, they can be all over the place. They are not consistent. So for me, I'm really creative, yet I struggle with maths. So that's kind of like my key difference. And the more contrasting your skills are, the higher likelihood that you are neurodiverse. So hopefully that makes sense. And I always think it's really great to start off with this, because looking at the history of different ways of thinking, to be honest with you, can be a bit negative, because history hasn't always been that forgiving to people who are different. So we've got a whole selection on dyslexia, as well as lots of history of coming up. So we've got autism, Asperger's, ADHD, some really interesting ones, as well as the history of dyslexia in pop culture. So how has the media represented it, which we will not be able to cover today, but is also really fascinating. And we've got anything about dyscalculia. Yes, not today, but we do have ones on am I dyscalculic, kind of really going into the detail. What are we looking for with the diagnosis? What does it even mean? What's the history? So yeah, do check out our Eventbrite. Anyway, that's enough of a plug. Let's get into the meaty stuff, even though I'm a vegetarian. So a brief history. Now, dyslexia really isn't that old. About like 130 years, I think, or it might be 150 now, of when it was first thought of, coined, developed. So it really is relatively new. And that's not because it has developed all of a sudden, it's just because now we're more informed, literacy rates are at an all-time high, so we've come a long, long way. Now, this is the first guy you need to know about, Adolf Kussmaul. Hopefully I pronounced his name right. And he was the first person that I can find who thought of dyslexia, but the word dyslexia didn't exist. No one knew what that word meant. He called it word blindness. So 1877, he diagnosed word blindness. And the way that he described it was individuals who had a high IQ but struggled to read. And for him, that didn't make much sense. And he didn't think it was just related to poor vision, but it was still very kind of early on. But the next guy is when dyslexia really started to get interesting, is in 1887. So this is when dyslexia was first coined. So before then, the word wasn't used. And our previous mate, though he came up with, essentially he described what dyslexia was, he didn't use very scientific terms. For him, it was more of a descriptive way of talking rather than, okay, here's a label that I'm going to use. And since then, dyslexia has remained quite consistent in our vocabulary. So being dyslexic, it's only in recent times has the vocabulary started to change more to being neurodiverse or neurodivergent, just because, unfortunately, a lot of negatives have been attached to the word. And sometimes it's better just to start again. But I think, it's a word that isn't going to go out of use. It definitely is still a lot to be reclaimed in terms of not being so negative based. So this is Rudolph and not the reindeer. What other names do you know for dyslexia? Now, I appreciate this might not all be positive, but it's definitely good to kind of document a history of what it has been called over the years. Or are there any other ways that you use to describe it? So Neil says cognitive word blindness. Nice. So we've got word blindness, which is quite common. Communication disorder. Yeah, because it is obviously largely about communication. Trouble writing, being called stupid. Unfortunately, that is what a lot of us have had to deal with, mainly due to ignorance on other people's sides. I think you kind of get the idea of why it's important to always define something at the beginning to make sure everyone's on the same page. Because if you ask, your average person on the high street, what is dyslexia? They'll probably say, oh, it's someone who can't read or write. Most dyslexics I know can read. They might not enjoy it. They might not find it easy. They might not be the fastest, but they can absolutely read. And when it comes to writing is related to dyslexia, but to give a more accurate depiction, dysgraphia, which is its own condition, is more related to kind of writing, handwriting, where dyslexia is more about like phonologics and speaking, though people do use them a little bit interchangeably. We've got dyslexia, specific learning disability, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, dyslexia, asephia, Okay, well, there's a lot here. So do check them out. But you can see from this list, we've got positives and we've got negatives. And it's very much, I think some of the worst culprits in terms of describing it negatively tend to come from those with dyslexia themselves. And maybe it's just because quite often we're given the label, but the label is never explained to us in terms of what it really means. Let's say, face it, there's lots of positives related to dyslexia, but you don't go to the doctor and say, I've got all these positives. Oh, here's a label of dyslexia. They only give you the label when you've had negatives attached. So I do think this is an area which has so much room for growth and to change as the years come. If I imagine that quite a few of you have already had diagnoses, or I mentioned some of you are here because of your children or the people you support. And if you've ever taken the time to actually read your report, you will notice that they are incredibly negative, because you can only get diagnosed if there are strong deficits. Now, A trend which is happening with a lot of organizations like exceptional individuals, but we're not the only ones, there are others, is to change the diagnosis to be more strength-based and more about what you can do, not despite of, but because of. But this is still a very early on. So if you are working with children and they are diagnosed, I would suggest looking at the form and kind of rewording it, not to change what it's saying, but that they are very negative. I read mine a few years back and I was shocked at it didn't paint me in the nicest of light, and it wasn't what I resonated with personally. So it'd be interesting to know your experiences. Now, this is by W. Pringle. So Morgan Pringle is, if you know much about dyslexia, which I appreciate, this is, quite new for a lot of people, he's normally like the household-ish name, what we think of. In my head, I just think of, the Pringle man with like a little mustache, but he was a real person. Yeah, exactly, Daniel. You kind of look like Mr. Pringle. And he wasn't that he did anything above and beyond for dyslexia that kind of made his name more famous and well known. It was more because the way he used to describe it. So before then, people like use scientific terms, or they came from a very kind of cold way of talking about dyslexia. But Pringle, he decided that if I put a name to it, it kind of humanizes it and it makes it feel so much more tangible. So I'm going to read it because this was one of the first mainstream ways where dyslexia was written in print, and I think it's actually really pivotal to how we currently understand it. So Percy F., a well-grown lad, I don't know what that means, did he eat his greens? Age 14, is the eldest son of an intelligent parent. So again, really cementing the nature versus nurture. He came from a good background, he was healthy, he wasn't ill, and the second child of a family of 7. So highlighting that it's not a one-off. He has always been a bright and intelligent boy. Again, reconfirming that this person is intelligent, quick at games, and is no way inferior to others of his age. His great difficulty has been, and is now, his ability to learn to read. The inability to is so remarkable and so pronounced that I have no doubt it is due to some congenital defect. You see, and this was written in 1896. And this is still a really good way of describing dyslexia. So we may think that it's always been perceived as a really negative thing, but no, not at all. Even at the beginning, people were still founding, when they kind of crafted the identity of dyslexia, they still kind of linked it up to intelligence. It's later on that the kind of narrative of dyslexia started to change, and we'll get onto that a little bit soon. But it has always been connected to intelligence in a positive light. April said, maybe Percy was known as a well-grown lad because the term teenager wasn't used back then. That's a really good point, actually. It wasn't used. But I do think it was to really highlight that he wasn't ill. So people didn't think, oh, maybe, he had some underlying illnesses. Not at all. You can be, fit as a fiddle, top of the line, and still have dyslexia. It's not related to any deficits on vitamins or nutrients that science has been able to find so far. Now, as I said, dyslexia started to change the narrative. Originally, even in the 30s, we knew it was a thing, but we didn't understand why. So the first thing is, because we called it word blindness originally, and dyslexia wasn't really used mainstream, people assumed it was due to eyesight. So this is a real poster of the time. John is not really dull, he may only needs his eyes examined. And it was related to people who were bad at school, struggled with reading and writing. And yeah, I do have glasses and I am dyslexic, but that's a coincidence. And they aren't related. There is a little bit of truth in it, and Miles-Erne syndrome, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, but it's a way where you when you wear like different tinted glasses, and it can help like with contrast, and that is related to dyslexia, but it's not a direct link. Dyslexia, you can have bad eyes, be dyslexic, not bad eyes, and dyslexia, And so the public health poster, which I'm guessing wasn't the NHS because it didn't exist then. I can't remember what year it came out, but for children were having difficulty. We now know this isn't true, but this was publicly circulated. Helen says, I always tell the person testing my eyes that I have dyslexia, just in case it affects things. And I think it can, it can throw a bit of a spanner in the works or be a bit of a red herring. So I know when I look at the board, I might say a letter wrong, even though I can read it, I can visibly see it. And I think it is worth mentioning it because there are lots of ways that people can kind of get mixed up or confused. Now, this is a bit of a fun game. Oh no, this isn't fun, this section. This is just to understand what you think would be the most help. So what would be the biggest thing that would help you or the people you work with dyslexia? Would it be getting a diagnosis nice and early, or just having the average Joe understand dyslexia a little bit better? Or should it be understanding for yourself? Or maybe that if everyone had assistive technology, the barriers wouldn't exist and it would just be a different way of processing information. Oh, Angel said, I never thought about that. I'm assuming you're on about the getting your eyes done. It's definitely worth mentioning it, I find, because sometimes, sadly, and this is a true story, I got glasses when I was like 3 years old because they thought I had dyslexia. No, sorry, they just thought I had bad eyes, and I didn't have bad eyes. And unfortunately, I had bad eyes after that because I had something I didn't need. And it turns out that I was dyslexic, even though I was way beyond the age of being able to read. I still affected how I kind of concentrated and my eyes focused on different things. So I'm not saying this happens to everyone, but it happened to me. And now I got these for life. I think I probably would have had them anyway, but I definitely didn't need them at that age. All right, so we've got here is early diagnosis. Yep, the sooner you find out, the sooner you can get help. And the sooner you can tailor the way that you learn. If you're going to school and they're teaching you in a very typical way and you have dyslexia, of course you're going to find hard. You can catch up, definitely, but who wants to catch up? You'd much rather be going at the same pace as everyone else. It makes life a lot more fluid. Understanding awareness from others, yes. Just because you do not have something doesn't mean you shouldn't spend at least a couple of minutes learning about it. It's like, I don't have diabetes, but I still learn about it because it's still worthwhile knowing how other people's lives are affected and kind of what they go through. And I see the last one here is assistive technology. Technology is a great thing, but I think it should always be used to complement life and not be like the absolute crust of it that we should rely on. Evelyn has said, regarding vision, convergence and tracking may be an issue to rule out. Oh, thank you. Joe says, are eye exams able to use letters that aren't typically trouble letters for those with dyslexia, or can any letter be a trouble spot for those with dyslexia? It's a good question, and there are letters which are less troublesome. So say like the letter H, the capital H, you can't really go wrong because no matter which way you swap it, it's the same letter. But letters like P or D are more problematic. This is why they typically always use capitals, because capitals are a lot less likely to get confused. But we're going to look at an eye exam in a minute, and I guess we'll be able to see what letters we think are problematic. But sometimes just the font that is used can be a bit troublesome. I don't know if any of you have heard of the Dyslexia font. I'm personally not a fan of it, but for a lot of people do find it useful. And all it is a normal font, but the letters are slightly chunkier at the bottom, which is meant to weight it onto the page to stop it jumping about. And Vicky says, yes, my daughter was tested for all of that before her dyslexia assessment, Evelyn. Her tracking and convergence are apparently better than average, as in her eyesight. Perfect example, thank you. All right, look at this. Did any of you ever remember going to the opticians and wearing these really, really heavy glasses? Oh, they were awful. I hated them so much, though they did look kind of cool in my opinion. In 1944, it was commonly believed that reading disabilities was caused by vision problems. And as such, look at this. And I appreciate this is really small for a lot of you. And this is genuinely how they would diagnose dyslexia or let people know if you had like a reading difficulty. And for me, looking at this, if you see the font, it's normal text they use. They're not using capital letters. They're using a font which the eyes can easily misinterpret. Yes, and for this, it's a shame really that so many people were kind of led to believe that there was a difficulty, and it works both ways. Sometimes it could be that you just needed glasses, and people said it was a learning disorder. It goes both ways, though they are actually quite different in terms of how the brain. Well, what's the issue? One is a physical issue. One's a mental issue. Still a lot of confusion. Now, 1962, and I appreciate a lot of you aren't in the UK, but the UK has always, well, it's just where I know my background from, to be honest. But it's when it was first used in Parliament. So the government did not accept dyslexia. Even 1962, it wasn't recognised. It was known about, but it was not recognised. No one really gave it time of the day. But this was the first time when the term was mentioned. And it might not sound that significant, but this is when you can start quoting it and really give it some emphasis. All right, here's a very awkward Boris Johnson on the left. Do you believe, in your personal opinion, that governments are currently doing enough for dyslexics, children and adults? And this is because dyslexia is now recognised. It is under the Equality Act, which I'll cover a bit more soon. And we have come a long way, but is it enough? Maybe this is a bit of a loaded question, because I think we can most imagine that most people would say no, because we are struggling and there are like challenges and there isn't that awareness. But it is important to think about these things, because we've made a lot of progress. But if we just kind of become complacent, like, you know what, it's not great, but it will do, progress stops moving. Remember, politicians, no matter what country you're in, only do things if they believe it will win them votes overall. So we can't stop pioneering and kind of like pushing the narrative and the real life stories forward. Angel says emphasis is on children. Yeah, and that's a really good point. Whether or not we think they're doing good or not, dyslexia is an adult. It's a lifelong way of thinking. The fact that we put so much focus on children and not enough on adults, and it's the same for all things like dyslexia, dyspraxia. Oh, do we have a question from Fozana?
Yeah, I think it's really awkward. It's not considered as a disability, and to get a diagnosis as an adult for dyslexia, you've got to pay for it privately. Why is that?
So it's a really good question. And it's weird that it's so much easier to get a diagnosis of ADHD or autism than it is for dyslexia or dyspraxia on the health service. I wish I had a proper answer for you, but I don't. To pay for it could easily cost a few, like £200, £300, £500 just to get someone to say whether you have it or if you do not. Yeah, it's not fair. And whether or not this changes, I think it depends heavily on the government and whether or not people are saying that this is something they want. For those of you who are not in the UK, I'd be curious to know, does any of your governments, how do they recognise dyslexia? Is it something that assessments are offered, or is it something that has to be completely private? Okay. Oh, Vicky says, agreed. My daughter was diagnosed ADHD and has had her autism assessment today. We have had to pay privately for her dyslexia assessment, and we're waiting for referral for dyspraxia assessment, which again is free. I didn't get it. Okay. I've got to be careful with what I say here, because sometimes you can get ADHD and autism free, but they do not give these out willy-nilly. You know, they will really try to be diagnosed for any of those. What they have to do is rule out all the other possible things it potentially could be in order to get to that one. And getting you diagnosed as an adult will be one of their last resorts. But unfortunately, it really is true. Like, I got diagnosed with ASD easy, but getting diagnosed as dyslexic, now that was a battle. You know, that took a lot of effort, even while I was in the school system. just because the budget they have is quite minimal for these things. Leona, we get nothing free in Massachusetts. I paid, wow, $3,500 for several diagnoses. Ouch. America, eh? I think consider ourselves lucky for keeping it under 1,000. But the 1970 in the UK is when the Disabled Person Act first came in. And this was legislation which said, you know what, disabled people are real and we should probably do something and support them, which is amazing. However, it didn't make reference to dyslexia. I mean, it made like passing reference, but it didn't kind of explicitly said, this is a disability. This is something that you are required to support. You can't discriminate. It was still something which didn't really matter. But we are starting to make progress. Only a few years ago, people talked about it in Parliament. Now it's kind of in an act, but not really. So we are seeing things progressing. It took like hundreds of years before, like decades would go past before any progression. Now in recent time, it is starting to like pick up momentum. Evelyn said, in New York State, we are working on legislation to mandate dyslexia screening. 2021, other states are ahead of NYS. Federally, we are working on the same. That's really interesting. Now, on this one, should dyslexia be classed as a disability? And this is for all of you to answer, because I'd be really interested to know. And this is one which really isn't a trick question, because there's pros and cons either way, depending on how you personally feel.
Yes, hi, this is Evelyn. I'm going to explain my answer. Back in the 1978 or 79, mostly in the East Coast of the United States, we felt it needed to be a disability in order to guarantee that students would get attention and that programs, awareness, and interventions and diagnoses would naturally develop. That did not happen. So at this juncture, I think it needs to be still called a disability because the individual educational plans are a legal document and the parents have recourse if the school districts do not facilitate proper gains for students. But again, we don't have very many programs in the United States and in New York State, although we're working on it. So and that being said, sorry I'm taking up so much time here.
Oh, no, not at all. It's interesting.
It's really not a disability in my professional opinion, but I think, you know, using the classification helps in order to get the right program that is effective, okay, the right approach to teaching dyslexics, and then the effective approach and high gain approach, and then also to assure that districts are held accountable. But for some reason, they're being coached as to how to thwart the efforts of parents. So it's really awful. Anyway, thank you for listening.
No, thank you. That was really interesting. And I think I agree a lot with what you said. For me, dyslexia is only a disability depending on your personal circumstances. So when you're younger, when you don't understand it, when the people around you do not understand it, of course it's a disability because it puts you at a disadvantage to the rest of the population for no fault of your own. However, once you understand it, once you're in like the workplace with a team who gets you and understands you, and if it's managed in the correct way, it can be an advantage, just a different way of kind of going about your life. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's a disability, not inherently, but societally. And that would be my take on it. But I'm glad it's a disability because it does mean that governments have to do something. So Rachel says, the students I support would say yes because of how they feel on the inside. I think that's the true, Rachel. It does depend on how you feel. And over time, it is shifting. But for me, some days it feels like a disability, definitely. And other days, not so much. So it's not kind of as black and white as some kind of conditions or illnesses or, you know, those sorts of things. All right. Well,
can I say something?
Oh, yeah, please do.
Why is it dyslexia? What's the difference between dyslexia that lacks to be to be recognized as a disability compared to the rest of the spectrum condition that Tourette's, Asperger's, ADHD. What is the difference between this one and the rest of them? What's stopping it to be recognized as a disability?
Well, that's the thing. It is officially, under the UK at least, it is a disability, and all of like the neurodivergent different ways of thinking are disabilities. So dyspraxia, ADHD, autism are all officially disabilities. I'm just saying whether or not you personally resonate with that, I think is a personal opinion. Now, 1971, we're finally getting people talking about dyslexia, and finally we've got some champions who want to make a difference. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with Helen Arkell. Helen was someone who cared very deeply about supporting those with dyslexia. She had dyslexia, but didn't know, and she struggled a lot, and she was able to use and dedicate her life into creating a foundation and a center which has gone on to help diagnose, support people all around the world, and definitely in the UK, she has been a massive influence. Unfortunately, she died a few years ago, but she got awarded like a lifetime achievement or contribution award. And I think she got given it by Princess Beatrice because she has dyslexia and she's one of the Patreons. So definitely a worthwhile case study to kind of learn about dyslexia advocacy, definitely one of like the leading pioneers. Oh, interesting comment here from Rihanna, who said, I would say it is a super ability that has allowed me to be more creative and approach things different to the way my colleagues or peers would of not neurodiverse. But as we operate in a world with one size fits all, it feels like a disability. Yes, I couldn't have worded it better myself. It is a great thing to have, but as we live in a world which was built for one type of mindset with very little flexibility, it does naturally bring challenges. And I think that is a crucial thing. What makes a disability a disability? It's when you're not able to navigate the world in the same way that a able person is willing to. But it's a controversial area. I think it really does come down to personal thoughts on the matter and experiences. Anna said, I always think of the flowers. We adjust the environment to the needs of the flower to thrive. We are more understanding of flowers and people. That's a really good way of looking at it. I love a bit of gardening, and it really does make a difference. If I treated all my plants the same, some would flower high and some would wilt. But yet if I understood each flower and put them in like one shady spot, a windy spot, they do flourish and thrive. Now, this fella is interesting. To the Tizard Report, the Tizard Report on children with specific learning difficulties, he was skeptical that dyslexia even existed. There was this growing kind of concern in the 70s, and this is where we start to see the reputation plummet. So where I was saying like it's getting good, better all the time, then it plummeted. Because there was this kind of word going around that dyslexia was a middle class white condition for parents to give their children who are underachieving, and they wanted an explanation. There's no way that my child can be struggling. My child isn't naughty, isn't, concentrating. They're dyslexic. So this report called that out into question. And this kind of mentality and thinking, sadly, has never really gone away from the public conscious. Same with other neurodivergents like ADHD. We still have a very negative perception because there was a massive increase in diagnosis, like everyone was getting diagnosed. And that also led the credibility of the disorder, or whatever you like to call it, kind of taking a bit of a hit. So this was a very kind of important report, even if not for the best reasons. Now, the Dyslexia Association, which if one of you have heard it, is one of the biggest ones, and that both of them launched in the same year. I think actually all of the dyslexia associations and organizations in the UK, I think they're all in Berkshire. They were all in like one area, which I think was really interesting. They all kind of sprouted up in the same place. And the Dyslexia Association and Dyslexia Institution eventually merged, but originally they were like separate entities. Now, I appreciate not all of you are in the UK, but I'd be interesting to know, like, have you heard of these organizations? These are just some of the ones that exist today, but there are lots of different ones that support. Yes, I'm glad one of you put exceptional individuals, because I think one of the most famous ones at the moment is Made by Dyslexia, and they specialize in getting famous people. So they have Keira Knightley, Richard Branson as their kind of role models, which is really good to hear public people of high profile say, I've got it. Dyslexia Action, I work with them. I thought they went bust recently, but maybe they were able to like recover. The others are kind of like some are or vary in different sizes, but there is support available. I would say though, as a lot of these services are free, you can't expect miracles from them, but a lot of them are volunteers who are doing their absolute best. Okay, Lisa said has got a comment, and quite a long one, but I'll give it a read. My daughter hasn't officially been diagnosed. She was referred to me by years ago, but only more recently have given extra time for exams, etc. I don't know how she struggles and what to do. Can this help? However, they have said I can only get her diagnosed privately. That is, it will cost a lot of money and that there is not worth it. It suggests that they are doing it already and will already have adapted. What are your thoughts? That's a really good question, Lisa. So my daughter very likely has dyslexia, but maybe not enough for her to get diagnosed by the government. Should I get her diagnosed? I always say, as an adult, it's not always necessary because a quality workplace should support you regardless of any diagnosis. But as a child, it is actually beneficial because it will give you like support, and not just in school, but in college and in university. I would try and really push for it, but depending on the price, I think it is worth it, but that is a personal decision. A good starting place would be to look online for dyslexia tests, and they are not scientific, by the way. We've got them on our website. Good starting point to see if it's worthwhile investigating further. Just bear in mind that just because a test on the internet said you have high likelihood of being dyslexic doesn't mean you have dyslexia. It's just relating your answers to common characteristics. Evelyn, Made by Dyslexia came to the USA. Yeah, Kate Grid, yeah, has been helpful in our efforts in Washington, D.C. Oh, that's really good to hear. I do like what they're doing, to be honest. A quality workplace does not support without a diagnosis. Well, in the UK at least, they do, but they don't have to. And I think that's the key thing. Under the Equality Act, they have to make reasonable adjustments, but the word reasonable is a very grey area. Kerry says you should still be eligible to receive extra time irrespective of a diagnosis. Based on her speed of writing, etc., speak to the Senko in school and speak to the employer to see if they would fund it. Thank you for that. Useful as a teacher to have students coming in with a report. They will award access arrangements, go extra funding, PC exam. This takes us longer to award them with educational establishments, and we don't diagnose. We just give access. That's interesting. You can all get Al Enco at the school and education psychologist on board. School can grant extra 25% in exams, and this carries on to funders or further ed. Really interesting. Thank you. I must say, when it comes to pre-scene, it's not my specialism. I predominantly work with those of working age and above. So this is all really interesting for me. All right, we'll quickly carry on and get to modern times. Dyslexia is recognized. Woohoo! 1987, really not that long ago. In living memory for a lot of people here today, the government officially recognized dyslexia in a debate. So it took this long, like 100 years, to be officially recognized by the UK government, let alone other places around the world. In 2002, we started to get scientific. So we started to do MRI scans, you know, those kind of things where you go like in the machines. And I did research to find out how the brain works. And they found out that when the brain is kind of reading, it lights up less than those without dyslexia. So they did notice there was a difference in the brain activity, which is great because before then, there was still doubt on the scientific merit. We're at very early stages of really getting to the grips of the science, and the next few points are going to get a little bit more controversial just because they're newer. Now we're at the modern time where the view of dyslexia is changing. So it's being featured more in the news, featured more in TV and pop culture. A really good example is a book and TV series called Hank Zimmer, and it's made by Fonzie, you know, from Happy Days. Monday, Tuesday, happy days. So, and it's a really show about the positives of dyslexia. Like, this guy is like the modern day Dennis the Menace, but his dyslexia kind of gives him that added strength. So even now it is being portrayed in a positive light while still acknowledging the challenges. And though this is a BBC production, it's obviously an American writer. So, and originally the American media didn't want to buy it. They didn't want to commission it because they didn't think it would sell. They didn't think that anyone wanted to hear about it. So Fonzie, bless him, had to go to the UK, get it made, get famous, and then resell it back to the US once it was established. This is just a really quick game to see what current celebrities do you know to be dyslexic. Which one is not dyslexic? Jennifer Aniston, Steven Spielberg, Whoopi Goldberg, or Ringo Starr? Oh, that music really caught me off guard. Yeah, Ringo Starr is not, but John Lennon is. Jennifer Aniston, can't wait to watch the Friends reunion. Steven Spielberg and Whoopi Goldberg all are. Okay, question 2 of 2, and then we can leave the awkward elevator music behind us. One more. Which one of these is not dyslexic? Is it Muhammad Ali, Ariana Grande, Richard Branson, or Keira Knightley? Interesting. Yes, it is Ariana Grande. She is not, as far as we're aware. And I think it's really important to know about these celebrities, though I don't think we should focus on them heavily, just because it shows you that there are really successful people smashing it day in, day out, not despite, but because of their dyslexia in a lot of the ways. So well done, hustler, whoever that is. We've got some interesting names. Whew, that music I found awfully stressful. Okay, we're getting nearer to up modern time. The dyslexic gene. Is it nature or is it nurture? Well, it's both. We found that those who came from underprivileged backgrounds were more likely to have dyslexia, but that wasn't necessarily the reason, because sometimes, you know, your upbringing and your genes do play a massive part. And it has been found out that dyslexia is hereditary, meaning that it does run in families. So if you have it, your children very well could have it. If your grandparents have it, there's a high likelihood that you do. So it does run in families. And this was only something that was properly being able to establish recently, despite kind of visibly knowing it existed for a long time. So suddenly the science is backing up what we already knew. Now, if any of you had the opportunity to have your DNA analyzed for dyslexia, so no more doing these assessment malarkey, actually getting someone to get a bit like swab your gums, put it in a machine and tell you if you had dyslexia or not, would you go for it? Okay, interesting. Strongly agree. I'm still undecided on that because I've got a DNA kit in my bedroom and I've been meaning to do it for a while, but I don't know how I feel about an organization having my DNA on record. So I would want to know a little bit more about how they're storing the information. It's not currently possible to do this that I'm aware of, but it's only a matter of time. Now, 2019, Grammarly. Oh, don't worry about this. Use this paragraph to explain something. Obviously, I didn't do that. But why I put that here is technology is starting to really make a positive difference. I can now do a job where a lot of my day is writing and computer work, which would not have been possible if I was in the workforce 10 years earlier. So Grammarly isn't the best one. Well, for me it is, but it's not the only one. But we are coming at great headways. 2010, the Equality Act. Woohoo! This is when all the different equalities were all kind of piled together to consolidate and said, if you discriminate against any of these intentionally, we can sue you. It's not easy to sue people, but at least in theory, we have a place to stand on. Dyslexia, if you go to a workplace and your employer, they have to at least make some adjustment for you. What that adjustment looks like, who knows? But it's a really good starting point. And the Equality Act, I'm continuously quoting, particularly if anyone are struggling at work or with their employer. It's not always good to go and push the red nuclear button every time you're having a difficulty at work, saying, you know, Equality Act, but it is good to have in your back pocket. Helen said, unfortunately, there seems to be loopholes. There is, and that's why I don't want to big it up completely. It's a starting point, and it's something to know about, but it's not something you can like fully rely on, sadly. But I'm curious to know, what other protected characteristics do any of you resonate with? And this is confidential, by the way, so I'm not going to know, because typically dyslexia isn't the key thing that you get discriminated against. It's like it makes whatever these others are, it can make anything more challenging. So if you're already struggling with being considered too old for a job, the dyslexia is going to make it even more challenging. Or if you're already at a disadvantage for being pregnant, you know, early on, and someone might discriminate, dyslexia can make that even harder. So just think about that. It is challenging, but it's normally challenging even more so when you apply it to something else. So electric current therapy, this sounds bad, right? This is what they used to do for autism back in the day, when they used to strap people up, electrocute them, and hope that we would cure their way of thinking. But it isn't as bad as it sounds. And all it is like little shocks. Apparently, it's only as powerful as a Christmas light. So really not that powerful. And the idea was it allowed people to read faster. Would I do it? I don't know. But it is something that is being currently explored. So would you do electric therapy if you thought it worked? Are you kind of like, hell no, I'm not doing this? Or, yeah, zap me up, buttercup. I want to get shocked. Sanjana said, electric therapy used for treating mental health. Yes, that as well. It's used for a lot of things. I'm not sure on it myself, to be honest. I'm not sure. But it's early days, and I'm open to more research, along as it isn't like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, you know, when the guy's like strapped up in the eyes. Like, no one wants that. How far should we go to cure dyslexia? This is a big question, and we are going to get some interesting answers. But should we cure dyslexia? If we can, should we? Should we just change society? Should, you know, if it's invasive, would you have it done? Or if it's just like a magic pill? I'm by no means advocating for any sort of cure, but it's interesting to find out where people kind of lie on the spectrum. This is not ECL. We cannot cure it. We can only develop good strategies to cope with it. Nice. Deep brain stimulation is a treatment for a number of issues and has been a true gift for those who have Parkinson's, depression. Thanks, Sharon. That's really interesting. There is no cure. We are all individuals. Yes. No, no, no. We should cure the society. Brilliant. In my opinion, there is nothing that needs curing. I love being dyslexic, ASD. I find it more challenging. Disabilities shouldn't be cured, but managed. We should find ways of assisting in coping mechanisms, like the font you mentioned. Universal design is a good way to go. Why cure it if we don't explore it just because it's an inconvenience? So I think most of us are on the same page here, to be honest. I think a cure would be to look more positive to dyslexia. Nice. That's really, really positive to hear that a lot of you feel this way, and that's really great. But ultimately, it's in the future, who knows what life will be like, and it will always be a decision. You don't cure a disability. The fact that each neurodiversity brings its own benefit in itself is a bonus, absolutely. And there's even been research to find out that neurodiversity has been an evolutionary advantage to help kind of like positive evolution. I didn't explain that perfectly well, but there is some really interesting research on how neurodiversity has always been there and how it has kind of spearheaded innovation, and maybe it's intentionally part of DNA. But before I get too controversial, here's some really challenging ethics questions. So would you have your DNA analysis? We had that. Would you feel comfortable dyslexia being seen as a genetic mutation rather than a disorder? Should parents start screening for dyslexia in pregnancy? These are not easy questions, by the way. but they're questions that are going to be asked the more that technology and science is developed. So most of you would have your DNA analyzed. You wouldn't feel comfortable with the name of genetic mutation rather than disorder. I think the word mutation has negative connotations. I'm not as against this, but I think it's how we interpret, is this a good or a bad thing? I'm not a mutant, I'm not like an X-Men, though that would be pretty cool. It's different. And parents, I mean, yeah, you could screen for dyslexia, but what difference would it make? Would it change what you did with your child? I don't know. The whole idea of curing a disability is a dangerous road to go down. Smells like brain manipulation. Yes. I'm by no means no way advocating for it, by the way. It's more to say that these discussions are starting to happen, and this brings us up to where we are today, and how it kind of paves out is very much up to us.
Nat, this is Evelyn Whitebank.
Oh yeah, go for it.
I feel very strongly about this, as I've been in this field for about 40 or 50 years, even though I don't look that old. That being said, over the course of this history, there have been geneticists that are looking at ways to eradicate dyslexia. And over the year, there's other researchers like in France and in, I think it was Oklahoma in the United States also. They were saying that this genetic variation, it really isn't, but it's increasing because with the complexity of society and complexity of modern life, because the characteristics of dyslexics include inventiveness, in some realms of dyslexia, creativity, problem solving to the nth degree. In fact, 65% of NASA is dyslexic, and they want it that way because of the creative engineering and abilities that dyslexics have. That being said, I would not trust the geneticists at this point in time if they want to eradicate those kinds of things as our society and mankind and cultures become more complex. So, and also it would lend itself to abortion if you were doing an encouragement with ill-educated or ill-informed, rather, people influencing that. So I feel extremely strongly about that. So
No, thank you.
I'll just stop. If anybody has questions, I'm glad to answer them.
That's really interesting. Thank you. I know for me, I personally wouldn't get rid of it, even if I was able to. The amount of geniuses and change makers in the world that wouldn't have made their great innovations if dyslexia didn't exist, that's not a world I'd want to live in, to be honest. I appreciate. Oh, sorry.
That who was also a researcher said that dyslexics are here to help mankind survive itself.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Thank you.
Kerry, I find the whole idea of genetic eradication very unsavory. Yeah, it's a controversial area. Society wanting to cure it is very worrying. Would we lose a lot of amazing superpowers? Absolutely. Sometimes it's best not to tinker with things unless we fully understand it. And again, I really can't emphasize enough, this is just conversations that are currently happening. How they shape or how they form is still very early on. And I think it's important that we understand the history in order to influence and inform our decisions on future debates. So as we have reached the end, I would like you to know that I've been Nat. This is Exceptional Individuals, and feel free to get in contact with us. If you found this one interesting, we also have webinars coming up on the history of autism, as well as ADHD and dyspraxia, as well as learning more about pop culture and how has the media reflected autism or dyslexia in the past. So that's just on our Eventbrite channel. But I really hope that was useful to everyone. And as always, complete pleasure and lovely having you. Oh, Joe, thanks for getting up really early. Appreciate it. It's a controversial area, so the fact that we can have an adult conversation about it and push the narrative a little bit further, I'm always impressed. Bye.